Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. This is the first of what we expect will be many updates on the state of our economy and our budget and much more in New York City. We are convening today ahead of budget season for the city and the state, as the budget deadlines and the milestones are going to be coming fast and furious. And we want to call your attention today to a looming budget gap that we believe has big implications for our budget. And we want to talk about how we got into this mess. So we're going to start out with the top line numbers, which are pretty striking. We are facing, according to my office's projections, a mid-year budget gap in New York City of $2.2 billion. And that is for the year that we're in the middle of, that ends in June. We're going to talk about why that's pretty unusual. And we're facing an even bigger gap for the year that begins in July of $10.4 billion. Now, those of you who are veterans of New York City budgets, those of you who perhaps have been covering our city's fiscal beat for years might understandably say, well, every January, New York City projects a deficit in the out years. Why is this remarkable? I asked myself the same question. And what you can see here, actually, this is, okay, there we go, thank you. What you can see here on this slide is that a mid-year gap of the scale we face right now is actually extremely unusual. In fact, normally at this time of year, we are facing budget surpluses that are driven by better than expected tax receipts usually. And this allows us to essentially pocket some of that good news, roll it over to the next year, and address what are typically out-year budget gaps. So again, what we're seeing here is remarkable, unique, I believe, since the 2008 financial crisis. And that is a mid-year adjustment to the budget showing a deficit that we have to plug by June. How about the out years? Let's go to the next slide, please. Again, you would be right to observe that we often project budgets in the out years, budget deficits in the out years. But the scale of the gap is, again, beyond what we have seen in recent memory at over $10 billion. This is far beyond what we saw last year, and I believe any year since the 2008 financial crisis. What's driving this? And I think normally you might guess that these kinds of gaps are driven by an economic slowdown. That would be my first assumption as well. That turns out not to be what is driving our gaps. In fact, we saw national economic growth continue in the second half of the calendar year, and it's allowed us to have a projection of a low likelihood of recession in 2026. And if we look at numbers here closer to home in New York, we see many indications of a strong economic performance. We have seen the best commercial leasing at a pace that we haven't seen in 20 years. We are seeing tourism numbers bounce back. We're seeing Broadway attendance back up to pre-pandemic levels. And most importantly, we are benefiting from a very strong stock market with an S&P that rose over 16 percentage points in 2025. And that, of course, has a major impact on the city's economy and fiscal health. Now, there are challenges in the economy, and most dramatically in the near total freeze in hiring in New York, outside of one exception, which is the social service sectors, and particularly home health aides, which tend to be low-paying jobs. I don't want to minimize how serious the hiring freeze is, and we're going to be talking a great deal about it in the days ahead. But the bottom line for our budget, next slide please, is that tax receipts are up this year. We are not facing a slowdown in our tax receipts, up 6.8%, building on a strong increase last year. And this is not just because of a strong stock market. That, of course, is a major factor. We're seeing wage growth. We're seeing strong corporate profits. We're seeing property tax receipts as well, looking extremely strong. So all around, the revenue's coming in. So what is happening? How is it that in the midst of a fairly decent economy, with tax receipts that are up this year, we are facing the largest budget gaps, totaling $12 billion in this year and next year combined? How is this happening? And the answer is the budget practices of the previous administration. First, an over-reliance on one-shot budget measures that essentially push out gaps into subsequent years. For example, we saw a reduction in prepaid expenses. This is a typical measure in how much we're enduring this year versus pushing out into the future. And we can go into more detail. Some of that gets very technical. But a much larger driver of this gap is the excessive under-budgeting of expenses that we know we are going to occur. Now, this has been happening for a while in New York City, unfortunately, for years, but it has gotten out of hand of late. I talked about expenses we know we're going to incur: overtime in the workforce, shelter expenses, special ed expenses at the Department of Education for lawsuits connected to Connor and Carter cases. Every year we see these numbers. Every year they've been under budgeted. But again, the scale of the under budgeting is now at a level we haven't seen in quite some time, particularly in one area that I want to focus on right now, which is our housing voucher program known as City FEBS. This is a really important program for New York City. It is keeping families, it's helping families leave the shelter system and keeping them in their apartments at a time when we do have a housing affordability crisis. I'm really proud of the fact that we are, I believe, the only city in the country that has essentially its own version of Section 8. We've got a housing voucher program here in New York City beyond the limited resources of Section 8, and we need it. But we're not honestly accounting for that. Next slide, please. Sorry, we'll just go. We're making all these available to our reporters, but I want to go to the graph here that shows just how dramatic the under-budgeting for City FEBS is. This program is growing at a pace of 4% a month. Now, it's hard for us to wrap our heads around exponentials, but at a growth rate of 4% a month, this means a doubling every year and a half. And you're seeing that we're not accounting for that in what had been the previous administration's projections, and that these gaps now exceed $3 billion, over $4 billion in the out years. Even this dramatic pace of growth and this dramatic under-budgeting does not account for the expansion of the program that is currently wrapped up in court. That would expand eligibility in a variety of ways, and again, for very good reasons. Raising the income cap, because we know people are struggling, even if they're not the lowest income tier, making it possible for people to begin to receive the voucher before they get into the homeless shelter, because if we can avoid a shelter stay, we prefer to. These are important goals. But our office estimates that if this measure, again, currently tied up in court, were to be implemented, it would add between $6 billion and $20 billion more to the costs of this program in the first 5 years. Costs not accounted for in this chart, not accounted for in our current gap projections. That is a very wide range. I said $6 billion to $20 billion over 5 years. There are a lot of unknowns about just the pace of enrollment after an expansion, and also there are savings because people are not in the shelter, so you have to make a lot of assumptions. But even at the low end, even if it's $6 billion, this is a significant extra budget burden, again, not accounted for in the current budget projections that we got from the last administration. So we are raising the alarm now about the scale of these gaps, $12 billion in the current year and the next year combined. We're entering budget season. Really, we get into to high gear next week, and we're going to have to make some tough decisions about revenue and expenses, and there are trade-offs in almost any possible policy solution. With one exception that I want to highlight, which is if we can grow our economy, then we avoid the difficult trade-offs, for example, that budget cuts would entail. And you're going to hear me talk a lot about this in the days and weeks and months ahead, about how important it is that New York City be a place where businesses want to invest, where they want to hire, where they want to grow their workforces, where they want to rent more office space, where they want to build, because the economic vitality, the employment growth that comes out of that, among many other benefits, also helps to solve our budget challenges because it brings more revenue in without us having to make more difficult choices, particularly on cutting vital programs. I think I'm going to pause there. This is our big picture today, and open it up to your questions. We can start with Mark. Hi, Dana. This is a big challenge for all of us, a challenge for the mayor and the city council and the comptroller and everyone who cares about the budget. We have a couple goals today. One is to ensure the city honestly confronts the scale of this challenge. I'm putting these numbers out here, far exceed what OMB had published just a few weeks ago. Secondly, we want the city to end the practices that got us into this mess. Reliance on one-shots, and particularly this long-running practice of underestimating expenses that we know we're going to incur. And we are going to face some tough choices in closing this gap. I actually don't believe it means we cannot still do bold things programmatically. And look, we've made some progress already. Kudos to the governor and the mayor for agreeing on a pretty significant expansion in childcare. A good pilot this year, starting with a bigger expansion in the subsequent year. I still think we can do bold things, perhaps with multi-year phase-ins, but it's got to be done in the context of honest budgeting, or we're simply going to make these problems much more acute in the years ahead. I'm not going to call for specific solutions today. This is Friday. We're expecting the state budget next week. We have the city's proposal due in mid-February. We have a long way to go. This, for me, is an opening step in the budget process. Our goals today are first to frame the scale of the problem, to emphasize the need for better accounting, and to lay off some of the trade-offs that we're going to be facing. Thank you. Yes?
Do these projections take into consideration the insolvency of the Health Insurance Stabilization Fund? I'm wondering if you had the opportunity to read your predecessor's audit of that fund and what you make of this recommendation.
Thank you, and I appreciate your reporting on this. And yes, I have read my predecessor's audit. I think a few things are pretty clear. The fund is insolvent, and the fund unfortunately has, we still believe, outstanding obligations that are going to need to be cleared. And this is going to be my focus, but I think it's pretty clear that the fund has outlived its previously stated purpose and needs to be retired at this point, but we do have to deal with the obligations. This is going to be a matter for ongoing negotiations, I think, between the Office of Labor Relations and the Municipal Labor Committee, but we're going to be, I think, very involved in the effort to make sure that we clear out those obligations. I'm going to ask Francesco to clarify whether those obligations were factored into our gap projections.
Do city workers and retirees need to worry about their health costs as a result of the insolvency of the fund?
No, they do not. That'll be a matter for negotiations, but we as a city need to worry about those costs, and I'm going to be fighting to make sure we close those obligations. Did you want to weigh in, Francesco, on whether?
Those gaps include an assumption that the city will have to pay, will have to increase its healthcare costs for the what was GSI at the same rate that you mentioned on, which grew 12%. That has not been recognized that has not been included in the mayor's plan in November, but there is a risk that
I apologize I did not introduce Francesco Brindisi, who's probably known to all of you, Executive Deputy Comptroller. Thank you, Francesco. All right. Any other? Yes.
For the budget proposal that was voted on February 1st, how does this budget affect the priorities for different policies that Ms. Wang has proposed, such as like childcare, food vouchers, et cetera? Is there a reprioritization of these policies, and do you know which ones are going to be
Yeah, look, this is an issue that Dana got to herself. Look, this is a challenge, right? We're not going to sugarcoat this. This is a challenging budget outlook. To have a mid-year gap, again, this is quite unusual. To have a gap of the scale that we're projecting for next year, something we haven't seen outside of an economic slowdown in New York City, certainly not in an environment where we have such strong tax receipts. This does not mean we still cannot act boldly, and it might mean that our biggest plans need to be phased in over multiple years. That's normally how major policy change is rolled out in New York. Also takes time to build out complicated programs. I think the mayor has spoken openly about not just the financial, but the logistical challenges of rolling out major programs like childcare. In fact, universal pre-K, which we all see now in retrospect as a massive success, took a number of years to fully build out at scale. So this is a challenge, but these are overcomable if we have good budget practices. And I'm fighting to make sure we do. All right. All right, off topic it is. Go crazy.
You know, your predecessor oversaw $87 million in investments to Palantir, and you've been sort of very against ICE. Obviously, Palantir is one of ICE's biggest technology consultants. Do you expect to continue those investments? Do you expect to look at those investments?
Look, I want to start by saying how absolutely appalled I am by the fact that we have masked, unnamed, heavily armed, poorly trained, unaccountable federal agencies terrorizing a major American city right now that have led to the death of a young mother who leaves 3 children, one of whom is now an orphan. The fact that there is going to apparently be no accountability for the individual who shot her. This is frightening. And I'm worried for New York City. I'm worried for America right now. I now want to talk about our task here as being fiduciaries for New York City's pension system. We have a pension portfolio that collectively exceeds $300 billion, approaching $1/3 of $1 trillion, one of the largest on earth. We need to deploy that across the entire global economy to achieve our goals on diversity. That means that we own everything. We own stocks and bonds and real estate. We have private equity managing some of our assets. To a lesser degree, we still have hedge funds managing some of our assets. We are in the American market. We are in every single economy globally. That's what it takes. And we own a wide array of in public traded stock among companies that I and others find have objectionable practices. We are aggressive shareholders, and we are flexing our muscle. We own these companies. We have a vote for their board of directors. We have the power to engage in shareholder activism. We have historically, and we will under my term as comptroller. There's an annual rhythm to this. We're, in the weeks ahead, preparing our agenda for shareholder activism for 2026. I don't have news on that today, but you can expect that the actions of ICE are going to be top of mind for us as we engage in that activism in 2026.
Just to follow up, how are you accounting for anticipated shortcomings or clawbacks from the Trump administration as they seek to take money away from sanctuary cities?
As they seek to take money away from?
Sanctuary cities.
We send billions more to Washington every year than we get back. We are a donor state. We are subsidizing red states like Mississippi to the tune of billions of dollars a year. We are an economic engine for America, despite the way we are maligned by the far right in this country and often by the president himself. In that context, it is outrageous that they would seek to dial back the fairly limited funding that we're already receiving relative to the scale of our economy and what we contribute to the federal budget. But in the context of what the president has proposed, an illegal action. These are grants we've already been awarded based on objective criteria, funding streams established by the United States Congress. There's no legal basis to cut those grants, and thank God we have Tish James as Attorney General, who repeatedly has taken the federal government to court based on similar threats and consistently won, and we expect she will in this case. And as for the pretext that the president is using, that we're a sanctuary city, this term is thrown around a lot in ways it's kind of gotten divorced from reality. This means that the New York Police Department has determined that its charge is to fight crime in New York City, not to participate in civil immigration enforcement. We have a division of duties in law enforcement. The NYPD exists to fight crime in New York City. That is its charge. It's not just me saying that. It is Commissioner Jessica Tisch who is saying that, and there are compelling public safety reasons for that, including that you don't want witnesses to crime to be scared to come forward and speak out because of their documentation status, or victims of crime, for that matter, to be scared to speak out because of their documentation status. So we have very good reasons for our current division of duties between the NYPD and civil enforcement authorities, and to threaten to illegally take money away from, by the way, housing assistance and child care and special education services, and wait for it, public safety funding. To do all that is really reprehensible. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? All right, thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.